Born in 1890 during the Viennese Belle Epoque, director Fritz Lang started his long career at Germany's leading movie studio UFA in Berlin. The Austrian visionary quickly distinguished himself from his peers due to his original filmmaking style. He invented the action-adventure film for the 20th century, with the treasure hunt spectacle Spiders. Lang is also responsible for the first big-budget, scientifically accurate space movie, Woman on the Moon. His pioneering spy classic Spione, on the other hand, set up the conventions and the visual language of espionage cinema, which are still being used today. Due to the success of these films, each of Lang's epics got bigger in budget and scope. Inspired by pulp fiction magazines of the day and the Art Deco architecture of New York City, the famed artist got to collaborate with his screenwriter wife, Thea van Harbo, on a movie which would become his most famous production. Metropolis, a futuristic drama set in a dystopian city in the year 2026, explores the romance between characters from different classes. Lang used this premise as a means to comment on injustice within society. His credibility as a thinking director allowed sci-fi to be taken seriously, with the now classic silent motion picture. The award-winning movie maker used the city setting in Metropolis as an allegory of the divide among humankind, with the underprivileged class being forced to live underground, while life went on above ground for citizens of wealth. The experienced director wanted the design of the city to be a highly stylized version of Art Deco, which back then was synonymous with modernity. In a further critique of modern life, he gave the architecture an exaggerated space-age edge. It was this approach that set a new standard for art direction in cinema. At the time, Metropolis was among the most expensive movies ever made, with a budget that translates to almost $200 million today. Despite that, it received mixed reviews, and at 2 hours long, theaters couldn't play it enough times a day for it to make a profit. Today, Metropolis is seen as a high point in socially conscious filmmaking, and stylistically has been acknowledged as a major influence by pop culture icons like Madonna and contemporary A-list filmmakers such as Ridley Scott, proving that even after 92 years, Metropolis is still relevant and inspiring in terms of content and style.
For more on exactly how Metropolis is still both relevant and inspiring, let's turn to Barbara Mennel, a professor of film studies at the University of Florida. Hi Barbara, welcome to Showcase.
Welcome.
What makes Metropolis so unique?
Metropolis created iconographic images. On the one hand, of working male bodies that Madonna used in her video Material Girl, and on the other hand, of a futuristic city that was also decaying, which Ridley Scott used for Blade Runner.
But I think it's also safe to say that it was panned by critics at the time. Why was that? What were they saying about it?
The critics panned it for different reasons. The socialists and communists thought that it didn't go far enough, that it should have called for a revolution. Whereas the other filmmakers, like experimental filmmaker Louis Buñuel, thought that the narrative was too traditional, and he blamed Thea von Harbo, Fritz Lang's wife, who wrote the script. Finally, other science fiction writers like A.G. Wells thought that the technology in the film was actually outdated and not as modernist as it should be.
Mm-hmm. And also the restoration process of the movie was, I guess, quite adventurous. Parts of the original cut was found in Argentina, right?
Yes, they were found in the Film Museum in Buenos Aires on a 16mm print. And then the Murnau Foundation in Germany restored it digitally and tried to approximate the original film.
But I'm also wondering, what Fritz Lang was inspired by. How did he and why did he come up with such a movie?
Fritz Lang claimed in an interview with Peter Bogdanovich that he had the idea when he saw the skyline of New York City when he traveled to New York City with a ship. But it is known by scholars that he actually submitted the treatment much earlier to UFA, the production company in Germany. So scholars think that he told the story to create this idea that he had the singular vision in that moment where he saw something, instead of it actually coming out of the atmosphere of the time of Berlin in the 1920s.
And he was also inspired by New York, right?
Yes, he was inspired by going to New York City and seeing modernity, but that was also a trend in the 1920s in Berlin in art and culture, poetry and painting in general.
And how was the budget like? I think it was one of the most expensive movies at the time, wasn't it?
It was the most expensive movie at the time. The original budget was supposed to be 800,000 Reichsmark at the time, but at the end it was over 4 million Reichsmark. So it was the most expensive budget, yes.
And before we wrap up, how did Metropolis inspire modern-day cinema? Can you please talk me through it?
I think it mostly inspired other science fiction films, from Blade Runner to Dark City and finally The Matrix. It inspired particularly the set design, the futuristic city that's already decaying. That became a signature in the late 20th century science fiction films.
So there are no signs of Metropolis' legacy disappearing, I guess.
No, and when I show it to my students, they really still enjoy the film.
Thank you so much, Barbara, for joining us on Showcase today.
Thank you, it was a pleasure.